morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning or good afternoon, whichever you prefer. Welcome to Chapter 7, Section 2, Video Notes. When we do our video notes, remember, you can always pause or rewind the video, go at your own pace in case there's something that you missed or need to review. These notes will also help you later on in the hour when we are working on our Chapter 7, Section 2 guided reading in our packet. In Chapter 7, Section 2, we are going to go over a court case, a treaty, a doctrine that was put out there by Monroe and the Missouri Compromise. All of these things have to do with the United States building nationalism, and we're going to go over what nationalism is here in just a second with a bell ringer. But the Missouri Compromise is going to be a big issue with the idea of slavery, so they have to try and figure out how to get along and how to agree on certain things to build up the country as a whole, yet we still see a divide between the North and the South over the issue of slavery. So let's get our notebooks out and get ready for our bell ringer. All right, it's time for our bell ringer. Make sure you have your notebook out, writing today's date. You can continue right below the last notes or bell ringer that we did in our notebook. I'm going to show you a quick clip on the next slide, and you are going to answer the question here. How is the crowd that you're seeing in the clip showing nationalism? How is the crowd showing nationalism? Okay, once again, here's your question. How is the crowd that is shown in that video clip showing nationalism? So I will give you about 30 seconds here to write your answer. Make sure it is in complete sentences in your notebook. All right, time is up. By a raise of hands, how many of you mentioned something about the crowd chanting USA? By another raising of hands, how many of you guys wrote something about the way the crowd was dressed, wearing their red, white, and blue? Finally, by a showing of hands, how many of you guys wrote down something about them holding signs that was encouraging this hockey team for the Olympics? Now, this is just video notes. It's not an actual lecture where we would be answering questions back and forth. So those of you who actually raised your hand, you're probably feeling a little silly right now. And those of you who didn't, please feel free to laugh at those who did. So just as a quick review, nationalism is when people are having pride in one's country, or they have patriotic feelings, principles, or efforts. So everything that we're going to see today in these video notes are things that the United States is trying to do to build up nationalism, to build up the pride in their country. Now, we've talked a little bit early on that they've had issues. Early on in the country's history, they actually went through another war, the War of 1812, where Great Britain was trying to get back at the United States and take them back under their control because of the money issue. The colonies made Great Britain lots and lots of money, so they did not want to give them up so easily. So there were a lot of issues that they faced in foreign policy with the War of 1812, but also with their domestic policy, things that are happening in the United States. President Washington had to set up his cabinet and had to figure out what the Constitution was actually saying. And he had to figure out how to get things done based on an outline of the Constitution. He also had to set up the judiciary branch. The only court that's stated in the Constitution is the Supreme Court, but he needed more lower-level courts to help him out. So what we saw in the video was an example of nationalism. People were proud of their country and proud of their team, in this case a women's hockey team during the Olympics. They were showing their patriotism through dressing up in their red, white, and blue, showing signs in the crowd, and chanting USA. All of those things are examples of nationalism. So everything we're going to see in this section has to do and surrounds nationalism. So nationalism is the centerpiece of each of these decisions that we're going to see here in Chapter 7, Section 2. So all the court rulings that go on have to do with the focus on building up the country. The foreign policy issues that the United States and decisions that they make are all going to deal with building up pride in country. And then we also have the beginning of westward expansion. This is all going to play into the United States' feeling of pride in their country. So just as a quick review, with expansion, the United States, as we saw at the very beginning, is going to start off with 13 colonies, and they're not allowed to go on the other side of the mountains because of the king. After the French and Indian War, the United States will gain the land up to the Mississippi River, and now they're expanding their territory that way. Finally, the Louisiana Purchase here is going to give the United States a pretty big chunk of land. In this section, we will also see how this land and this expansion is going to result in the United States getting their hands on Florida. All right, straight into the Wild Wild West. Westward expansion is going to be an example of increased nationalism. So some of the people that are settling on the frontier and new states being formed, that's going to help increase the pride in the country because they're able to grow, they're able to get bigger, stronger, more powerful. When territories are going to reach 60,000 people, that's when the people of that territory could petition the United States for admission as a state. This goes back to the Articles of Confederation. Under the Articles of Confederation, one of the accomplishments here of the Articles of Confederation was the Northwest Ordinance, and this is the process by which territories are becoming states. So they're going to keep that in the Constitution because it was a benefit. And again, once there's hit 60,000 people, they could draft a petition to the United States government, ask if they can become a state, and then once they are accepted, they would draft a constitution, elect representatives, and become a state with Congress's approval. Every territory that wants to become a state has to go through this process. Even today, if a new territory were to become a state and they petition to become a state to the United States government, they would have to go through this process. That's a little bit of Snoop Dogg, Got Beef. And the reason why we're playing Got Beef is because the Missouri Compromise, which is our first topic here, is going to be an issue, or actually a resolution to an issue that the North and the South is going to have over slavery. So in 1818, there are 10 free states and 10 slave states. So our 10 free states: Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey. Maine is not yet a state. Illinois is not yet a state. But these two are going to play a part in the Missouri Compromise. On the bottom here, when we look at the slave states, we have Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. Virginia is just one right now. There's no West Virginia yet. Kentucky, Tennessee, Maryland, Delaware. So it's 10 free, and there are 10 slave. So it's even. Now the idea here is each side, the North and the South, want more votes. So the more states that they get equals the more votes that they get, which equals the more power that they have. So more votes equals more power. Say that together, everyone at once. More votes equals more power. So each side wants to make sure that the other side is not getting more states than the other side. Because if they had 11 free states and only 10 slave states, then the free states would rule Congress, and they would have more votes. Same thing if the slave states had 11 and the free only 10. Then the slave states could pass laws that would benefit them and not the North. So there's always a constant fight, a back and forth between how many states each side has. So after 1818, Illinois is going to become the 21st state, which would be the 11th free state. So now you have 11 free, and you only have 10 slave. But Missouri is expected to apply for statehood, and that would be the 11th slave state, so they would be at 11 again. But something's going to happen with Missouri where it's not going to become a state right away. It gets hung up, and for a while there, Illinois becoming the 11th free state is going to give the North an advantage.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and I'm from Missouri. You may think that Missouri is boring or full of hillbillies or lacking in culture. You're probably thinking of Arkansas, because Missouri is awesome.
That was Jeff, and he thinks Missouri is awesome. But what's happening in 1818 with Missouri, a lot of people didn't think was so awesome. Missouri's annexation, or becoming a state, is blocked. And the North is accused of trying to end slavery. And then South, there's no way that they're going to go for that. Their whole economy is based off of slavery. It's free labor. It makes them more money. Everything is set up in their greedy ways to make money off of their cash crops using this free labor. The South is going to try and extend slavery, is what the North is thinking. So both sides are starting to think that the other side is wrong for their view on slavery. The North thinks that the South is trying to bring slavery all the way into the North because Missouri is kind of, it's borderline being in the North and the South, as we'll look at in a map in just a second. And then the North is accused of trying to get rid of slavery altogether, and the South will not have that at all. But the crisis is averted when Alabama enters the Union as a 22nd state. So once again, you have 11 free states and 11 slave states in 1819. Missouri, however, still wants to get into the Union. And this is the first time where you're going to see the discussion and hear the thoughts of an actual civil war between the North and the South. So you have the South that's going to fight to the death to keep their way of life, to keep their lifestyle alive, with their economy being so beneficial to them and making so much money for them because of the free labor with the slaves. But as of now, it's 11 and 11. But Missouri kind of still hangs in the balance out there, and something has to be done because as a young country, you do not want to blow up into a civil war early on here in 1819 and show the rest of the world that you're not prepared and you can't handle your own business. That's Oh Henry by Millie Small. Don't worry, I've never heard of it either. But Henry is going to play a huge part in the Missouri Compromise. The Speaker of the House, Henry Clay, many of you may have seen him in some of your storyboards that you did. And also, when I did the example of the American system, Henry Clay also plays a huge role in there. Later on, he's going to get the nickname as the Great Compromiser because he is involved in many of these compromises early in American history. So he's the Speaker of the House, and he is going to lead the House of Representatives in drafting this Missouri Compromise. And this compromise, remember, is very big to the United States because they don't want to be involved in a civil war early in their history. So the outcome of this compromise could very well lead the United States away from war or right into it. All right, a quick knowledge check. A couple of slides ago, I mentioned that both the North and the South were attempting to get more states in order to get more votes. Why did each side, both slave and free states, want to have more states in their control? I'll give you a second to write this down in your notebook. All right, time's up. You may want to rewind if you couldn't figure this out, but I'm going to give you a quick hint here, a quick fill in the blank that may help you. So I said to repeat after me all together, more votes equals, you fill in the blank. I'll give you another couple of seconds here to make sure that you can figure out the correct answer. Okay, once again, time is up. What I asked you to repeat after me and all together was more votes equals more power in the government. If either side was going to be able to control the votes, they can control the power in the legislative branch and pass laws and everything that would benefit them. So back to the Missouri Compromise, and that's exactly what they're going to decide to do. In 1820, Henry Clay is going to draw up this plan in which Maine is going to break away from Massachusetts and enter the Union as the 23rd state and 12th free state. Missouri is going to enter as the 24th state and the 12th slave state. So once again, they're back at 12 to 12. Both free and slave states are equal, which is going to ease the pain and ease the conflict between the North and the South over the slavery issue. But there's also a second part on the next slide that is going to help determine slavery from here on out. So here is the second part of the Missouri Compromise. This sometimes gets a little bit confusing, so we'll go slow. We'll take it step by step. I'll actually show you the map after this slide to hopefully show you exactly what this slide is explaining. So what they're going to do with the remaining Louisiana territory, these are all the territories that have not yet become states. They're going to divide it at the 3630 parallel line. And again, I'll show you that in just a second. It'll make more sense. That line is pretty much the southern border of Missouri. They're going to draw an imaginary line straight across. Any territory that's going to become a state after the Missouri Compromise and it is north of that line, will be a free state. Any territory that's below that line wanting to become a state will then become a slave state. This is going to help eliminate a lot of confusion. Instead of them arguing over whether a new state should be a slave state or a free state, they're now going to have a line in it that's cut and dry. If it's above that line, it's free. If it's below that line, it's a free slave state. Now, what makes this a little bit confusing is later on, when we get to the next couple chapters, is they're actually going to do away with that line, and they're going to have an idea of the people in those territories that are becoming states decide. But as for now, it's going to be that line that's going to determine free or slave states. This portion of the Missouri Compromise is going to avoid civil war. So now both sides, the North and the South, are happy. They don't think that the other side is trying to either extend slavery or get rid of slavery. So for the time being, it's going to avoid that talk of civil war. But the question of slavery is still going to remain. There still is sectionalism, where the North is going to take into account what's good for them and not the whole country. The South is the same thing. They're only going to think about what they want and what is good for them instead of what's good for a country. So we still see that division. We still see that the difference in opinion and the difference in lifestyles based on the question of slavery, and there's still going to be tension between the North and the South, but this is going to help ease the tension a little bit more. All right, the map that leads to the Missouri Compromise is seen here. So this is similar to the map that we had earlier in the presentation, only now you can see that Maine up here at the top is going to be admitted as a free state. They break away from New Hampshire and become their own state. Illinois is now a state. Alabama is now a state. And Missouri, the one that was going to be contested for a little bit, is going to be admitted into a state in 1821. And now here's that line that I was talking about. And it's kind of tough to see with this white pen here. I'll make it a little bit thicker so you can see it better. So here's that line, an imaginary line right on the bottom southern portion, southern border of Missouri. That line is going to be determining from here on out anything above that line is going to be a free state, and everything that is south of that line in that territory is going to be slave, at least for a while. Later on, we're going to see how that's going to change. But again, for the most part, this is going to alleviate that tension between the North and the South over slavery for a little bit and get rid of the talk of the Civil War. One of the things that kind of makes this a little bit confusing is although that line is going to determine slavery or free states, and everything above that line is going to be a free state, and everything below that line is going to be a slave state. There's one exception. Missouri, which came in as that slave state, is actually above that 3630 compromise line, but that is going to be a slave state. As I said, it's going to be a little bit confusing. Even if you look over here in Kentucky, Virginia, and Maryland, they're above that line technically, but they're still going to be slave states. So anything above that line is going to be free, with the exception of Missouri that came in as that slave state. So try and keep that straight with Missouri is a slave state, but it is above that line. Here's another depiction of that map. Maybe this will help you a little bit easier to break down the compromise. So you have, again, Maine up at the top up here. That is going to be the free state. Missouri is going to be admitted in 1821 as a slave state. And here's all the organized territories. They're going to call that free soil territory. And then you have your Missouri Compromise line. That's going to determine later on what kind of state this would be. Okay, and here's one of our examples. This is from 6th period. Xavier and Cornelius did a good job explaining the Missouri Compromise. Here you have Henry Clay admitting Maine as a free state, and then this little gentleman here is talking about how he wants now Missouri to be a slave state, so they're both looking for a balance. So they showed here the scale of free and slave states, which is good. And then here they explain the south of the Missouri Compromise line, slavery was legal, and north of the slavery line, slavery was banned. So that's a good depiction using our storyboard to show the Missouri Compromise there. So that was the domestic issue that was going on with the Missouri Compromise. Now we're going to get into some of the foreign policy issues, things that are happening with other countries and the United States, and how that is going to help build the sense of pride in our country and a sense of nationalism. right, so here we're going to learn about Florida. That, in case you didn't know, was Florida. Get it? Florida. So here we're going to see how Florida, or Florida, became part of the United States. The Adams-Onis Treaty from Spain, so Spain is going to own Florida up until this point, but this is going to give the opportunity to the United States to expand again. Remember when we think back to Thomas Jefferson, he used the elastic clause, which allowed him to stretch his power to purchase the Louisiana Territory from France. Here is going to be another way that the United States government is going to use that elastic clause to enhance their power. This Adams-Onis Treaty is when Spain is ceded Florida to the United States, which means that they're going to give it to the United States. It's going to become part of the U.S. Florida will then become a state once they get to their 60,000 people and petition the government to become a state. They're also going to give up some of their claim in the Oregon Territory. So the Spanish and the British and the United States all have claims in the Oregon Territory. They're going to now move that out of there. That becomes now more towards the United States side, and they're going to have a little bit more say and a little bit more influence in that area. So just as a quick review, get that one out of the way and bring this one in here. The Oregon Territory is in the northwest of the United States, this big circle up here. And remember when we talked about Lewis and Clark are going to start over here in St. Louis and go up the Mississippi River and find their way all the way over to Oregon Territory. And that was one of the ways that they're going to, the United States gets a little bit of territory and a claim in that region. So, and again, the reason why this was so important is when we look at the world map now, the United States is going to have a clear shot from Oregon. If we zoom in here again, Oregon's up over here, we'll circle that, and then we'll zoom back out. From that circle, they have free range to trade with China, Indonesia, and pretty much all of Asia. Instead of before, when they had to sail all the way around the bottom over here, past Mexico, past South America, past Central America to get there. So that's no longer needed with Oregon being a stronghold for the United States. All right, last and certainly not least is the Monroe Doctrine. During this time period, there are many countries that are trying to come into the Western Hemisphere and take control of some of the other countries, colonize them, and keep them for their own. But the United States doesn't want any interference with their hemisphere. They feel that could lead to conflict. So James Monroe is going to come up with the Monroe Doctrine. As you see here, Europe is not going to be allowed to come into and colonize the Western Hemisphere or bother any of the independent countries. And it also says that America would stay out of European affairs. So pretty much what we have is just like this little guy here says, don't start none, won't be none. You do you, I'll do me, you stay over there, shut up talking to me. This way there's no conflict between either of these countries, between the United States and any European countries, because everyone is staying in their own business. Some of us should take that advice. So here's a couple of political cartoons that might help us understand it a little bit better. Here you have Uncle Sam, which is a representation of the United States, kind of like our mascot. It actually was first brought up in the War of 1812. The United States is telling the rest of the world in Europe and Africa to stay out of this hemisphere. That is including not only North America, where the United States is, but also you can see down here South America. The United States is trying to keep everyone out of this Western Hemisphere. Here again, you see that North and South America being protected by Uncle Sam. This time he has a bat that's representing the Monroe Doctrine. And that's kind of saying that if these people come over here, then they're going to threaten the security of the United States, and the United States would have to defend itself. So you can see that they're taking this very seriously, not taking any chances on any other countries coming over and trying to mess with their area, with their stuff, so to speak. Here we have another example from 6th period. Nyla and Jada did a nice job here with the Monroe Doctrine. Up top here, we have the Americans and the Europeans talking, sitting down at the table, and the Europeans want Spain and Portugal again. They look pretty angry, but the United States is standing firm and saying they're not going to have it. Here you have President Monroe telling them you need to stop interfering with Western hemispheres, and then Europe says, fine, we'll do that as long as you stay out of our hemisphere. And they agree. So that's a good depiction there of the Monroe Doctrine. That brings us to the end of Chapter 7.2, video notes. Please log off the iPad and place it on the cart, plug it back in. You can now go into your packet and work on Chapter 7, Section 2, guided reading. And we also have a Chapter 7, Section 2 quiz. You do not have to do Section B for this quiz. Only Section A, I believe it's 5 multiple choice questions again. Thank you. You guys were a great audience today, and have a wonderful, special, outstanding, supertastic day.